Nick and I are here with you tonight or this afternoon for about the next 2 hours. This will be our second to last show of the semester, and we got some good stuff to talk about. We got NFL, obviously, getting down to the last part of the season. Got hockey and basketball going on, some off-season baseball stuff. But we'll start with college football because the conference championship games are this weekend, starting tonight with the Pac-12 championship game. So, which games stand out to you out of the championship games that most interest you?
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see how Washington really sticks out in the Pac-12 here, because we've seen them, absolutely destroy people, destroy opponents. But I feel like if they have a blowout in the conference championship game, then there's no doubt they're absolutely legit. They belong in that top four spot. But that'll be an interesting game too, to see if they can wrap it up and win the Pac-12.
Yeah, definitely. The Washington-Colorado game is at 9 o'clock tonight. And I think even if Washington wins by a close margin, I think they're definitely going to be one of the Final Four teams to make it into the playoffs. Because they're 11-1, and then if they're Pac-12 champions, I think they're definitely going to get in because they're already the fourth-ranked team right now. So I think any type of win, they get in. But if they are able to blow out Colorado and Clemson only sort of wins by a narrow margin, they could move up to 3, which I think would be a lot better for them because the 4 seed, whoever that's going to be, is going to have to play Alabama in the semifinals. And that's going to be a tough game for anyone because Alabama is by far the best team in the country right now. So I think if Washington can play really well and win by a couple touchdowns, they possibly have a chance to move up to 3, which I think would be a lot better for any team, really, not having to play Alabama in the first game.
No, definitely. I was reading an article, and a sports writer said, you know what, just give Alabama the trophy now. Why bother? Because they're just so good, and they're so above the rest of the pack. I think just what you just said, that there's Alabama, then there's everybody else, right? Pretty much is what.
Essentially,
what,
yeah.
Because
the other teams are good. Ohio State's obviously good, Washington, Clemson, but Alabama is by far the best team. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be automatic champions, but I think it would be considered an upset, I'd say, if anyone other than Alabama wins the national championship.
I think so. They got to be the favorite. 12-0. They've looked really good over the course of this season. They've played in some close games. You got to admit that, but they haven't really. They haven't lost, obviously, but they haven't really given you the idea that they're going to lose. In the playoffs, because just of how dominant they've been. And I heard a stat that they didn't give up a single touchdown at all during the month of November, right? Something like that. They didn't give up a single touchdown.
Wow.
Against all those teams. Think about that.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I heard that. If that's true, that's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's what I heard. Yeah, they didn't give up a single touchdown. So,
that's insane.
I know, right? So that just goes to show you the strength of their defense. And obviously their offense, is never a problem. They always, score a lot of points. So that'll be interesting to see if one of the top 4 teams can really push them and maybe pull off the surprising upset. But at this point, you got to have Alabama as the favorite, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
But it'll be interesting to see how these conference games shake out. Because Virginia Tech's not bad, who Clemson is playing for the ACC title. They're a good team. They only lost 3 games, so they could probably push Clemson. Clemson's had some struggles during the season. They lost to Pittsburgh, which is a team they should have beat. They almost lost to a couple teams they should have blown out by a lot, like NC State was one of them.
Yeah, they've had a lot of close games.
They really have, yeah.
Really shouldn't have been close for them.
Exactly. So that'll be interesting to see how they handle Virginia Tech. And then, like we said about Colorado and Washington, Colorado's 10-2. They're ranked 8th. Washington's ranked 4th. So that'll be a real good test for them to see how they do, if they're really legit and worthy of that getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, they're playing Virginia Tech in the the ACC championship game tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Yes, Virginia Tech is ranked. They're ranked number 23, and I mean they have a good team, but they should not be on Clemson's level. And if Clemson doesn't like blow out Virginia Tech, I mean, if Clemson wins, I think they're going to be in the national championship. But if they don't blow out Virginia Tech, I think they're going to drop down to 4 instead of 3.
Which can impact their opponent. Yep, Alabama.
In the semifinals.
Ooh. Here's a question, too, while we're talking rankings. Suppose Washington doesn't lose. They fall to 11-2. Do you give Michigan that 4th spot? Because Michigan has a strong case to get in. Because they're right now 5 behind Washington. So
yeah, I don't know. I think the Ohio State-Michigan game, I mean, it was a fantastic game and it was really close. And
absolutely,
either team could have won it. But I think probably only one of those 2 teams was going to make it, whichever team won. I think that if either Washington or Clemson were to lose this weekend, I think probably then the favorite to make the playoffs would be the winner of the Big Ten title game between Wisconsin and Penn State. Because yes, I mean Michigan is 5, Wisconsin and Penn State are 6 and 7, but I mean they're playing in their conference title games, which Michigan is not. So they have like an extra opportunity here this weekend to play a game to prove why they should make the playoffs, whereas Michigan has no more regular season games.
But on the other hand, you have a 49-10 absolute destruction of Penn State by Michigan when they played. They absolutely destroyed Penn State, 49-10, and then they beat Wisconsin too. So they beat both of those teams playing for the conference championship. So regardless of that, do you still give Michigan the advantage because they beat both of those teams?
Yeah.
During the regular season, that is.
When did? Yeah, they played them. Yeah. Well, they only beat Wisconsin 14-7.
Yeah, it was close, but
they played each other earlier in the year. I think Penn State and Wisconsin have gotten better as the year has gone on.
Oh, no question, yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, and Michigan is a 2-loss team right now, and then both Wisconsin and Penn State are also a 2-loss team. So, I mean, Michigan lost to, like, Wisconsin, but then Michigan lost to Iowa, which is a team that Wisconsin beat, and possibly Penn State, too. So, I mean, all the top teams in the Big Ten have sort of beat up on each other and have wins and losses against each other. So, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to say, maybe, but I don't know. It could go either way, really.
I mean, I was not really that bad of a team considering, they were this close to making it last year, and they only lost by a point. But, I mean, the loss is a loss, I guess. But that'll be interesting to see how the committee does that. Say if Washington was to stumble to a 2-loss team, but then you have a Michigan team coming out of a really solid Big Ten, obviously with both Wisconsin and Penn State being ranked, that's going to be really interesting. Wisconsin at number 6, Penn State right behind at 7. I don't know. I can really see Michigan getting in, even though they lost to Ohio State. That was a really close game. I think they would get the nod because, like I said, they do have the head-to-head wins against Wisconsin and Penn State, and they're from a really good conference. So, I mean, who else would you put in there if it's not going to be Michigan?
It would be whoever wins the Wisconsin-Penn State game.
But how would they have the case if another team beat both of them? Especially if Penn State wins, but then Michigan having that route win against them, that'd be really hard to argue for their case. I mean, yes, they're the Big Ten champs, but it wasn't just a win; it was absolutely destruction.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of factors that play into which teams get selected. I mean, head-to-head is definitely an important part. But, I mean, that game was in, like, September or something. So I think also a part of it is how are you playing right now in comparison to what you have been, I guess, if that makes sense. Because I think a ton of factors they look at. No one knows, like, for sure, unless you're on the committee, no one can tell you for sure what their thinking is. But I mean, it's a tough decision either way because they're all good teams.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, who knows? If Washington loses, they still might keep them in because they'd be a two-loss team. Michigan's already a two-loss team. So I mean, you never really know, what they're gonna do because they might just, like I said, keep them there because Colorado's a really good opponent. They're 10-2. They're ranked number 8th. Or do you think Colorado could somehow jump all those Big Ten teams and then just replace Washington as they would win the Pac-12? Do you think that could be a possibility?
If what happens?
If Washington were to lose, do you think Colorado could just switch spots with them and jump all those Big Ten teams? Because Colorado's a two-loss team as well. So we would have basically a cluster of two-loss teams rankings from 4
I
to...
don't, even if Colorado wins.
You don't do the... Okay.
I mean, it's going to be another Big Ten team because the Big Ten was much better of a conference than the Pac-12.
Oh, definitely. And they had a game at Michigan, which they lost. Michigan beat them, Colorado. So, again, that wouldn't really make sense from a committee standpoint to put them in ahead of Michigan when the two teams played head-to-head.
Yeah.
I feel like the Pac-12 wasn't super strong this year outside of Washington State and Utah. And they were ranked like top 20, they weren't top 10, so outside of those teams, Oregon's usually good, but they had a down year.
USC was good at some point.
Yeah, USC, they were a decent opponent. Yeah. But I don't see any Big 12 teams getting. I mean, Oklahoma's a two-loss team as well. They're sitting at 9. Oklahoma State at 10, 9-2 as well. But they don't have a championship game, and that's the problem that the Big 12 is having because they don't have a championship game to further help their cause of getting their teams in. They just have to basically get the at-large bid.
I don't think any of the Big 12 teams are going to make it.
Yeah, no, they just don't have. They don't have the championship game. They don't have the strength.
If one of the top 4 teams gets knocked out right now, it's going to be one of the other Big Ten teams. It'll either be Michigan, Wisconsin, or Penn State, probably.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Most likely Michigan, because like I said, they do have those wins. But that's always interesting to see how that final rankings shake out. What they decide, who they decide to give the edge to. In cases like this.
Yeah, I mean, do you know when the final rankings come out and get decided?
Not sure. I think it's like mid-December, isn't it? I think, right? Because they have to wait till all the games are over, right? And then they...
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
Mid-December sounds about right, but I couldn't tell you that for absolutely positive. But that's what I would think about when those rankings will come out.
Yeah, I'm not sure when the official day is that they would come out, but... Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I mean, so let's just say. Well, I mean, I guess we can talk about that on next week's show once we have a better picture of what's going to happen after these games. But so for the games this weekend, like say for the Wisconsin-Penn State game, who do you think will win that game?
Oh, that's tough because both of those teams are really good teams, and they're right next to each other in the rankings. 6 and 7, 10 and 2. This might not be a good way to pick it and decide it, but I might go Wisconsin because they were able to. When they played Michigan, they only lost by a touchdown, 7-14. So I might give them the edge. And Ohio State, they lost by a touchdown in overtime, so those were really close games. So I would probably give the edge to Wisconsin, but I mean, I think this could go either way. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it'll definitely be a close game. I think Wisconsin is a slight favorite right now. Um, but I think I'm going to have to go with Wisconsin just because I think Penn State's offense is better, but I think Wisconsin's defense is better. So in like a one-game situation, I usually go for the better defensive team because Wisconsin is only averaging around 14 points given up per game right now.
Wow.
So their defense has been playing really well, and I think, yeah, as I said, I always go with defense over offense in like a one-game situation. But I think it should be a pretty close game.
Yeah.
It's surprising that it's Penn State and not either Michigan or Ohio State in the conference. But that's just how like the tiebreakers went and stuff throughout the season, because the three teams were tied and each of them had a win against the other. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because Penn State beat Ohio State, but then Ohio State just beat Michigan.
And Michigan beat
Penn State. Yeah, so that they were all had wins against each other. That was a whole situation I had to figure out. So that was interesting. That's how that shook out, because if Michigan won that game, they would be in this game, right? It'd be Michigan-Wisconsin, right? Because they'd have one loss.
Yeah, if Michigan beat Ohio State, then they'd be playing tomorrow, yeah.
Because they have one loss, so that would knock out Penn State, and they'd knock out Ohio State. But since Ohio State beat them, that knocked them out. And Ohio State itself was knocked out because Penn State had the head-to-head win against them. So that's how that was decided.
Yeah.
To clear up the confusion. But 6 versus 7, I mean, that's going to be really close, right? I mean, it doesn't get much closer than that. Matching records even, 10-2.
Yeah, it should be a pretty close game.
So I think that's definitely going to be one of the better conference games we're going to see, right? Because just how close it's going to be. I mean, Clemson, Virginia Tech could be also really good, but it's 3 versus 23. You know, there's 20 spots separating them, whereas this is like 6 and 7. Like,
yeah, I think the best game will probably be tonight's game, the Wisconsin-Colorado game, because, I mean, they're both ranked in the top 10, and I think there's, like, if Washington wins, they're in. So I think there's more implications because, like, if Washington and Clemson both win, then the Wisconsin-Penn State game probably doesn't really mean anything that much anymore, because neither of them, the winner probably still won't get in over Washington and Clemson. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if Washington and Clemson hold, they're gonna get in. I think they're gonna probably solidify their spots as 4 and 3. And Clemson play Ohio State, and then Washington would take on Alabama. But, yeah, I really don't think there's much hope left for Wisconsin or Penn State to get in, regardless, because I think Michigan would have the priority over them. But yeah, that Washington-Colorado game, that'll be really interesting, 4 versus 8. You know, it'll be interesting to see how Washington handles, a team that's looking, pretty good, like Colorado at number 8, 10-2, versus 11-1 team. So I feel like if Washington wins, they're definitely legit. I mean, they're going to have to play Alabama, so that's probably not going to go that well. But I think they definitely deserve to be in for sure if they knock off Colorado.
Yeah, if Washington wins, I think they're definitely going to get in.
Yeah. Because even though you have a Michigan team that has 2 losses in a tough conference, you still have that Washington team with 1 loss. So if you're the committee, would you value that 1-loss team higher just because they have less amount of losses, even though their conference is not as good?
Well, yeah, I mean, Washington's been like blowing teams out for the most part.
Yeah.
So I think if Washington wins tonight, they're a lock to get in, I would say. Because they just, their 1 loss was to what, USC, I think.
Yeah, USC.
But I mean, they have played some good team. I mean, yes, not as good as other conferences, but I mean, they blew out Washington State last week.
45-17. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I mean, Washington State's like, I mean, they're a ranked team, so they're still pretty good. They're not like on the Michigan level or anything like that. But.
Well, no, yeah, they've just been destroying people. I mean, they scored 70 on Oregon. I know they're not that good, but I mean, to still put up those kind of numbers, 66 on Cal. Cal was respectable. I felt like they were a decent team. I mean, they're not ranked, but they're not. I don't think they're one of the worst teams in the Pac-12. But to average those kind of numbers and to put up 44 on Stanford, who's normally a really good team, that just shows the strength of this team. And the week before Washington State, they put up 44 on Arizona State. So I mean, they're averaging at least 30 a game. I would say that's just a rough estimation of how many points they average a game. So.
Yeah, I think their offense is really good. So I think if they win, they're definitely going to make it.
Yeah, I think they got to be favored in this one too, as well. Obviously, because they're ranked higher, but.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really seen Colorado play that much, but I mean, they should. I mean, they are the eighth ranked team, so I think they can definitely hang with Washington, but I think Washington will probably pull away like in the second half sometime. But you never know; it could be like one turnover or something, or one bad call or something like that, and the game could be really close. So it's hard to say really, but I think Washington will probably win it, but I guess Colorado could keep it close. So.
Yeah, no, definitely interesting to see how these games play out. Are you giving the underdogs any chance? Florida and Alabama, Virginia Tech and Clemson, or you think they're just going to be blowouts for the most part?
Well, I think Alabama will win in a blowout. Clemson will probably win by like 1 or 2 scores. But yeah, Alabama will probably win by like 30. I think Clemson will probably win by like 10 or something. Because I think they're just much better teams than Florida and Virginia Tech. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Alabama's pretty much gonna roll into the national title game. No pun intended. With the Roll Tide thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean 8-3 versus 12-0. I mean that's pretty pretty clear there. Who's probably gonna win the game? I mean, Florida's just struggled at points during the season, where they haven't scored a lot, and they lost to teams they should have beaten. So you combine that with Alabama's defense, and then their offense, they're most likely going to get run over. And Clemson, Virginia Tech, it could be close because, like we said, Clemson's had a lot of close games during regular season, games they should have blown out people in, and they didn't. So that'll be interesting as well. But at the end of the day, I agree with you. I see the favorites pulling out. I see Alabama, Clemson, and then obviously Ohio State doesn't have a game because they're not in the Big Ten title game, but they're pretty much in. So they'll just have to wait to see where the teams end up ranking, so you can see where they're going to be playing. But how you see it as Alabama, Washington, right? Clemson, OSU, right, for the Final Four.
I think Washington could actually jump over Clemson, and so then Washington would play Ohio State, and then Alabama would play Clemson. That's what I would predict right now.
Just based on because they've been blowing out people, whereas Clemson's been kind of squeaking by in a lot of ways.
Played in a lot of close games, yeah.
No, I could see that too. I could totally see that. But then you got to take the factor into the conference as well. I'm obviously not taking away anything from Washington's performances. They've been great.
The ACC is really like the same level as the Pac-12. I would say at least. like neither conference is as good as like the Big Ten or the SEC.
Oh no, that's for sure. But you still had good teams in there. You had Louisville, who's good. They just lost a few games they should have won. Pittsburgh's not too shabby. I mean, they're not the best, obviously, but they're usually pretty competitive.
Well, I think like USC or some Pac-12 team would be better than like Pittsburgh.
No, I agree with that. USC was. I don't think they.
So, yeah, USC actually. Yeah, they won the last 8 straight games of their season.
Oh.
So they started 1-3, but then went 8-5.
That's pretty good. Yeah, so USC, they're definitely respectable. One of the better teams in the Pac-12 here. Yeah, basically after the Utah game, which they lost 27-31, very close game. Yeah, they're right. They won their last 8, that's really hard to do, especially against Washington, who is really good. And they beat Colorado, so they beat the 2 teams playing for the Pac-12 title. So, but anyway, I think that team could definitely beat Pittsburgh in the ACC, Virginia Tech. I think the ACC was definitely weaker this year, don't you think, than previous years?
The ACC?
Yeah, in terms of because Florida State was down too. They weren't that good either.
I mean, they're usually not known for being like that good of a football conference in comparison to the other big conferences. They're usually the basketball conference.
Yeah, that's for sure with the Carolina teams. Yeah.
I wasn't really surprised. There's usually not that many like there's usually 1 or 2 like great ACC teams, but nowhere near as much as the other conferences. So I that wasn't really that surprising to me.
Yeah, definitely. I would say definitely they're more known for their basketball than football. I would say the SEC and the Big Ten are like the main conferences for football, right?
Yeah, they're definitely the 2 best, I would say.
Yeah.
Yep. So, any other thing you want to say about that, or should we talk about a different sport?
I guess if you don't have any other really any kind of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are going to be playing 9 versus 10. That could be interesting. The 2 Oklahoma State teams. It's a rivalry game. They're both 9-2. So basically, pretty much outside those 4 spots, everyone's just competing for bowls, getting into the best one, right? The more prestigious, I guess, right, is where the other teams are left, right? They're not going to make the playoff, obviously, right?
Yeah,
they're just
much
competing to get to the best bowl that they can. So that'll be interesting to figure out where the left out teams, what bowls they end up playing in and against whom. Because, if Michigan gets left out, which they're probably going to, they're obviously going to want to play in the next best possible situation along with the rest of those teams. But especially a team like them who had the aspirations of winning a national title, and they had the team to do it. So that'll just be interesting to see where they end up putting them. The same thing with the title games, those losers and those winners, where do they end up in terms of going to bowls?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know, like, aren't some of the main bowl games now considered the semifinal games or something like that?
Something like that. The non-bowl games?
Yeah. I don't know, I probably really won't watch that many of the 9.
Yeah, playoff, right?
Playoff.
Yeah.
because I really don't care then at that point if about a team who's not competing for the national championship.
Oh yeah, definitely. That gets all the attention. The only the 4. But do you think they should expand that? Because that's another talking point. Where people are talking about, well, 4 is too little. They should expand it to either 6 or 8. To create more hype around it, give more teams the chance to play for the national title. Do you think they should do that?
Well, we kind of talked about this on our last show.
Yeah, but I mean, especially now with a lot of teams obviously feeling like they still have a case to get in and they're not going to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd probably be better if they expanded to 8, because it would give more teams a chance. But like I said last time, but then I was thinking about it and if they add 4 more teams to make it 8, then that Ohio State Michigan game would not have been as significant as it was, because then you would know win or lose both teams would make it, whereas now that it's just 4, only probably the winner of that game would make it. So I think there's an argument to be made on both sides of it, because you could argue that if you make it 8 teams, then some regular season games would mean more because more teams would have a shot of making it in. But then the way it is now, if you take that away and change it, then some other games would probably mean less. Like the Ohio State Michigan game would have meant less because both teams would have made it in regardless. So.
No, that's a good point too, because that game was pretty much what it was, which was do or die, which means win or go home, which is what that game was all about. And what a finish, huh? Double overtime, right?
Yeah.
Ohio State, I didn't see the whole game because I was working, over break, but I heard that Ohio State missed 2 field goals or something, right?
Yeah,
they missed a couple.
I think 2 field goals in during the regulation portion of the game.
Which could have won it from them. They wouldn't have had to go to overtime had they made those.
Yeah.
Or at least one of them.
I don't know, I forget exactly what happens. Because even though that was only a week ago, it feels like it was a really long time ago.
Yeah, no, I agree. But that was just crazy, though, with that happening. And then they tie it up, on a field goal, which they had missed a couple of them earlier on in the game. And then in overtime, instead of, kicking a field goal, they decided to go for it and then win the game. They made that risky 4th down call, which, obviously there was a lot of backlash over because a lot of people weren't sure if that player got the 1st down.
Yeah. I think there's something about the spot, I think, of the ball and that 4th down play that it was close and it was hard to tell if he actually got it or not, I think. And then they did kick a field goal at the end of the fourth quarter with a 7 left or something to tie and send it into overtime.
Yeah, that was just a crazy game, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it was definitely back and forth. Kind of what I expected. It wasn't all that high scoring. The final score was high, but that's just because of the overtime. It was 17-17 after regulation. So I didn't think it would be much higher than that. But it was a back and forth game. Both teams were pretty much evenly matched. But Ohio State just made, I guess, a couple more plays and ended up winning the game. Because their offense looked really good in the overtime periods. They just I think on 2 plays they scored in the first overtime really quickly, and then scored in the second overtime a touchdown fairly easily too.
Yeah, no, that game could have really gone either way. Really, a play here, a play there. Michigan could have been the winner instead of Ohio State. So that was just a great game, and I think you have a solid point there. It goes back to what you said about expanding the college playoff because you don't have as many of those games with so much on the stake, which makes which makes those games so enjoyable to watch. When everything's on the line, close games like that. That's what makes college football great.
Yeah.
So. It'll be interesting to see how they eventually, not just who they put in, but how they rank them too.
Yep. Yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting end here of the college football season going into the playoffs. So.
Yep. So I guess is there anything else that you want to mention regarding college football, or?
No, not really. So what else do you want to talk about?
Let's see here. I mean, college basketball is still, very early on in the season. They're still doing non-conference games, as they will be for a while. But I guess if you want to talk about that or hockey or whatever.
To be honest, I haven't really watched any college basketball. I pretty much start watching college basketball in January when the conference starts. And
Okay.
when I know which teams are actually fairly good.
All right. Well, whatever you want to talk about, hockey or whatever. Want to talk some Rangers?
And the Rangers, they did lose last night, but they've been playing pretty well overall. They're first in their division, second in their conference. Rangers. Columbus is actually third in the Metropolitan, which is surprising.
That is.
Rangers, Penguins, Columbus, and then Washington. But yeah, the Rangers have been playing pretty well. They've had a couple losses now over the last couple weeks. They lost to Pittsburgh and then Ottawa and now Buffalo. So they've kind of been going back and forth, win-loss, win-loss. They have Carolina again tomorrow, so hopefully they can beat them. And then the Islanders, who aren't really that good this year. But the Rangers have had really balanced scoring, which I think has helped them a lot. I haven't really watched any of the other teams in the league that much other than the Rangers. But how do you think they're playing in comparison to the other teams right now?
I think they're still fine. They had a couple losses here and there, but I still think they're in good shape. Wouldn't that be something though to get another win against the Islanders? Wouldn't that be great if because unfortunately the Rangers were swept last year by the Islanders, but if we came back to sweep them this season, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. So that'll be a great game. The two New York teams playing always makes for good hockey. Even though the Islanders are towards the bottom of their division, in the bottom of the league, it's still intense. Fans still come to the games, but I think the Rangers can snap out of this. I guess that happens with teams. You get going well, and then you just get in a little bit of a funk. Columbus is really good, which they were the team that started this losing streak, and then they lost in a shootout against Florida. That was a tough one. Pittsburgh's always good, and we beat them 5-2, but then they just – I don't know what happened when they beat them 5-2, and then 2 days later they come to Madison Square Garden and they get destroyed 6-1. So I don't know what happened there. And they started out good. They started out with a 1-goal lead. I was even listening to that game from home over break, and they just must have collapsed from that point forward. But then they recovered. They beat Philly, 3-2. Didn't score any goals against Ottawa. Lost that game. So then they beat Carolina. So, they've been up and down, So it'll be interesting to see how they do next 3-4 games here against teams they should be able to beat. Teams that are towards the bottom of the standings, the Islanders, the Jets. The Hawks should be a good game at Chicago. That'll be an interesting game when they go and play them.
Yeah, they play Chicago twice in 5 days or something.
Yeah, Friday and Tuesday. So it's gonna be insane because it's a home and home. So they go at Chicago, then they host the Devils on Sunday, and they play Chicago at MSG that Tuesday. So they'll definitely be tested with that stretch, and then they have to play at Dallas. I think the Dallas Stars are an okay team. They were a playoff team last year, so then they play Pittsburgh again December 20th. Those always make for great games now since both teams are doing so well, and they've met in the playoffs for the past couple of years. So I'll get some chance to play them again. But I think the Rangers are still good. Let's just get an update on that. They're still leading in the Metropolitan. They have 2 more points than Pittsburgh, so as long as they keep winning, they're going to be fine. And even if they don't win, if they push to overtime, that's great too because they'll at least get a point out of it instead of taking just a regular loss, which gets them no points in the standings.
Yeah.
And they're only one behind Montreal, who leads the East with 34. So I think they're in pretty good shape because outside of Pittsburgh, the closest would be 30, with Ottawa and Columbus having 30. They're tied for that. And then after that would be Washington with 28. So I feel like they're in a pretty good position right now.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, they're first in their conference. I mean, all teams are, even the best teams are going to go through stretches where they're not playing as well and they lose some games. And I think the Rangers are kind of in the middle of one right now. But I'm not too worried. They should be able to pick up play again. And it's still a long season. They'll have another 1 or 2 or 3 stretches again like this at some point throughout the year, like all teams do, basically. So I'm not too worried about it, really.
Yeah, no, definitely. The NHL season is a grind. It's a long stretch of games throughout the season. You obviously have some injuries to factor into that too, which changes up your lines. Changes up, who's out there with whom and when, which can impact how they play as a cohesive unit. So as it starts to get healthy again, and maybe they have a few more days in between games, they'll recover. So they should be okay. What they shouldn't do is underestimate their opponents, because even though teams like the Islanders, the Hurricanes, they're towards the bottom of the standings, they can still beat some really good teams. Like, for instance, when I was in North Carolina, watching the Duke Maris game, I got to go to the Hurricanes when they hosted the Capitals on Saturday, November 12th, and they beat them 5-1, which was very unexpected. All the talk down there was, the Caps the Hurricanes are really struggling. The Caps are really good. They're going to get destroyed. But it was completely opposite. I mean, they put up 5 against Washington, so that was just like, wow, kind of like a heads up. Then they beat the Sharks, who were the runners-up from the Stanley Cup last year. They're leading that Pacific Division in the Western Conference. Then they beat Montreal 3-2 after that, who's the best team in the East right now. So that was definitely a respectable win. They put up 3 on them.
Yeah, I mean, in a one-game situation, any team can beat any team.
No, absolutely. But they just can't go in with the mindset that they expect to win, because then I think that's how teams kind of surprise you a little bit too.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, they need to take every game seriously.
For sure, but I'm not worried about the Rangers. I know they'll get back on track. AV will make sure they don't slide. But it'll just be interesting when they do play those good teams from the West too, to see how they stack up. Against a team like Chicago, who's won a lot of cups in the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, it should be good. I'm waiting for them to play Montreal too, because Montreal is the best team in the Atlantic Division. So I think Montreal and the Rangers are the 2 best teams in the Eastern Conference, but they don't play Montreal until middle of January, I think.
Wow.
So, yeah, January, then in February, then in March. Yeah, 3 times. So.
No, but that'll definitely make for a good game, though. Like you said, top 2 teams.
Right, so do you want to take a break now and then?
Yeah, we can do that.
The second half of the show?
Yeah, we can totally do that.
Alright, so we'll take a break right now, and we will be back to talk about the baseball off season, and then our NFL picks as always.
Yep, so stay tuned for the Nick, Josh, and Aaron Sports Talk Radio Show. And definitely for all of you watching the Facebook Live, definitely submit any questions, comments, concerns you have, anything you want us to talk about, address. We really appreciate that because we will definitely get to them. So don't be afraid to type in a comment, question, anything. That'd be great. So stay tuned.